Thank you, Sherri Silverman, for joining us here at the DSA Divine Shakti Arts Podcast. And yeah, I appreciate you kind of reaching out and really enjoying looking at your body of work there and kind of your philosophy and what you're about. So yeah, I was excited to connect, and I'm glad this is happening. So yeah, thank you again. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be discussing art with you.
Absolutely. So so yeah, I feel maybe to start, we can kind of introduce the viewers a little bit about who you are. What you've a little bit about your background and art and such, and kind of what brought you to where you are.
Hmm. Okay.
It doesn't have to
So,
be long, whatever feels natural.
well, years ago when I was first discovering George O'Keeffe's books and art, I was really taken by the fact that she talked about her first memory, which was very visual. And my first memory that really has stuck with me is when I was about 4 and my family was selling our house in Atlanta to move to Florida. And I had this feeling and that I followed up on that whenever people would come to see the house, I would kind of drag them into my bedroom to show them the paintings I'd made at the back of my closet. And so that really has stuck in my mind, and it it actually begins my artist bio because it is a really memorable moment. It was also interesting because I was really never encouraged growing up to be an artist, and which is kind of telling considering that the paintings were hidden in the back of the closet in the corner. And I mentioned this to my mother when I first added it to my artist bio, which was about 10 years ago. And she was like, "Oh, we were doing everything we could to make the house look clean and tidy and presentable. And here you were showing them basically this mess you had made in the closet." And
Wow.
I was thinking, oh my God, she still doesn't get it. Like this was like many, many decades later.
Right.
So it was really interesting to me that was my first memory, and my sister's the one who got all the art lessons and I got pushed to be straight academic. So when it came to art, I always loved it, and I would collect all these pictures that I would cut out of magazines and I'd put them up all over my room, and I would make these uh, little plaques with them on that I would put up on the wall in my dorm room when I was in college. But it didn't occur to me that I was the one who could be making art until oh gosh, I guess it was about the mid 70s. I was dating an artist, and his parents were artists. And I took a couple of little courses at the Cambridge Center for Adult Education, one in color and design, and the other in watercolor. And I just loved it. And I was showing my little bitty, very colorful watercolors to this guy's father, who was a pretty famous artist. And he just was loving it and encouraging me. And he thought my poetry was fantastic. And so I was getting a big boost from that. And then I just started continuing on my own. And I mean, right away, I got gallery representation in Harvard Square at
Oh
a little
wow.
gallery. And there was another one that was going to take me on. And that's really how it all started. So I have very little training in studio art, just those a couple little courses like that, and one course in Nihongo Japanese mineral pigment painting that I took in 2015.
Oh,
But other
cool.
than that, I'm
Nice.
completely self-taught. And that's where it all came from, is that it was there all along and just had to start oozing out. And it's interesting because even in my astrological chart, it's really clear that I'm an artist,
Oh, wow.
in spite of everything else that I've done.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the self-taught process is kind of where all the where the gem is. It's like this like intimate relationship you have with yourself of learning, and like just like the flower petals unfolding of the different facets that you discover, and it's different than being taught, academically from a teacher. Although I definitely value that as well, but yeah, there's something like it's like this intimate experience with yourself when you're self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you learn kind of who you are in a sense. That's what it sort of feels like, because I've experienced like what it's like to teach yourself certain things, and definitely love that process.
Well, it's also interesting because, there's a strong bonus of having gone to art school, because you're exposed to so many different media that you're pushed to try things out. But on the other hand, it can sometimes be a very, very judgmental and narrow vision of how you should be creating. I remember years ago, I was teaching an honors course on the creative process at a university, and one of the students was an art studio art major. Most of the students were in other fields, and she was saying how she just felt so shut down in her art department at this particular state university, because they looked down on her because she wasn't wearing all black, and that she wasn't painting the kind of paintings that everyone, that the teachers thought they should all be making. In other words, like the teacher was making
Right.
himself. And I just thought, how sad that was, that they weren't encouraged to be themselves. And I once had an experience with a gallery director in Santa Fe who was looking at my slides, which was obviously, a long time ago. This is like the late 80s. And she was saying that I had been so protected by not going to art school, because I clearly had my own images and my own style and had found my own images. Whereas she would see people come out of art school and they they knew how to use the media, but they did not know, they had not found their own style of expression or their own images that were going to come up, their own symbols or way of styling or whatever.
Right.
So it's a big advantage that way. And I think what got me started was the fact that I had begun meditating and had been doing some long meditation courses. And it just got me really much more in touch with myself, so that things were flowing more. I started writing poetry again for the first time since junior high, and I started painting.
Wow.
So it's just such a big boost for creative work. And
Absolutely.
I'm really grateful that I somehow found out about that and started back in 1972.
Yeah. Wow.
This week was the 50-year anniversary of my learning to meditate,
Oh, wow.
so which was pretty
That's
cool.
that's beautiful. Wow, that's what a great practice to be keeping up like that for that amount of time. That's really beautiful.
Things are too busy in life and too crazy and too stressful, that if you find something that really works, any idiot would stick with it.
Right.
And I do encourage people, if they have not found an authentic meditation practice, to go for that, because it does bring you more in touch with yourself and your own flow of ideas, and that current of creativity does come through much more clearly, and you trust it more,
Right.
which is,
Right.
of course, key.
Yeah.
Because if you get all those ideas and you don't write them down or implement them in some way, then your intuition and creative flow just take a walk and they don't continue.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a very powerful tool. I definitely feel that as well. And yeah, to comment about what you said before, the I think it's tricky, for students to navigate through that art school path, and one has to be just kind of like keenly aware of like what they're doing in a sense, like they're finding their own voice and yet learning from a teacher at the same time. So it's like you have to respect like your teachers and take their advice, but have some sort of like grain of salt uh, in your the take it with a grain of salt in your mind, just because you don't want to completely lose yourself to someone else's opinion as well. And
Yes, and if the instructors are honoring the student, then they're not going to do things like, oh, this is what you really need to do is such and such, where they come in and they do something that really
right.
wrecks your painting, that they can do it off to the side or suggest here are a couple options on things that you could do. And because the whole idea of teaching is you want to be nurturing people's growth, but giving them some tools and options, and some ways of looking at things so that they can improve what they're doing.
Mm.
And that you're not imposing your particular narrow views and approach to art upon all of them and expecting them all to become out as mini yous.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's, I kind of almost look at it. I'm just thinking of this now. Really, it's like almost like teaching a language. Like there's the creative being, right, and then you're just giving them vocabulary to like use their innate creativity to express more, rather than like kind of pasting things on top of that creative being. You're just like giving them more avenues to express. And yeah, I think it takes a skilled teacher. It's you don't. It's kind of unfortunately, it seems like it's not that common to have that teacher that can totally play that role. And I think it's like a huge value to society if there's people like that can teach artists and just not just artists, people in general, I'd say.
Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, let's hear a little bit more. Like so about your story. So when I heard about like how it kicked off. What have you done a little bit more recently? And then maybe we can go into your spirituality a bit and how that kicked off a little bit.
Sure. Well, for decades, I did mostly pastels on paper. And pastels are, of course, wonderful because they're just that pure pigment. And there's just so much brilliance and richness there. They're just quite yummy. And then at a certain point, back around 2014, I started feeling like I wanted to use brushes again. So I'm a big researcher. I have a doctorate, and I researched everything because I wanted to make sure I was using something that was non-toxic
Mm.
and that was going to be easy to work with. And I ended up going back to water-based media. So I'm using mostly gouache. And then I ended up taking that wonderful course on Japanese mineral pigment painting, which was interesting because back in the 80s in Santa Fe, I'd gone to this lecture on Museum Hill, that this Indian woman artist was giving. And she would drive around New Mexico and take out her shovel and a bucket and dig up some rock or some soil in different places. And I love this idea of using natural materials. But then she would describe the hours and hours it took her to grind it down into particles that were possible to use for paint, and then having to mix it with a binder. And it sounded so labor intensive that I just let it go because I didn't have any instructions.
Oh,
And
wow.
and it's interesting because I had been interested in it for such an early time because I really like doing things that are very much in tune with nature and involving nature. So now it's a big thing again, or for the first time in probably a couple hundred years, because people are wanting to get away from all the toxicity and the synthetics, although many natural pigments are highly toxic. And a lot of these people aren't thinking about that. But, what I did in 2015 is I heard about this mineral pigment painting from Japan, and I got really excited, found out about this woman who teaches courses, managed to get the one scholarship a year, and went off to Connecticut to take the course. And it was really wonderful. So that's part of what I use is mineral pigment painting, things like indigo and cochineal, which is from insects. Indigo is, of course, from a plant. And then, ground down rocks and soil. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
fun. And then it also involves things like metallic leaf and sumi ink,
Oh, that's so
which,
cool.
yeah, so I use that some also. So I've just been mostly painting since 2014. Some of the pieces were mixing pastels in, and others were just strictly water-based media. Uh,
Yeah. Now
and
let me
yeah,
ask you a question. Did you actually get that experience finally of grinding down like the minerals and making it into pigments while you were taking that workshop, or what was
well,
that like?
in that particular workshop, she had pigments that were already ready made, but we had to learn how to make the glue
Okay.
and how to make the gesso, which is also the white, which is made from oyster shells that are dumped outside in big heaps for like 15 or 20 years before they're even used
Oh my
because they have
God.
to age a certain amount. So this is, this is slow art. It's
So interesting.
process art. It's not like just squeeze it out of a tube and get going.
Right.
Yeah, it's like when I used to teach art history, when we would talk about Native American art, one of the art forms was decorating mostly leather goods with beads. But they started off, you wanted to decorate some moccasins you were making. First, you go and catch a porcupine. Then you pull out all the quills and clean them. Then you have to chop them into little pieces and dye them, and then you can start sewing them on. So it's a whole different way of looking at life, and it's not like, oh, I think I'll just take this next half hour and make a small painting. You have to do a lot of prep.
Wow. Yeah.
So we learned how to do that, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's like a whole lifestyle it creates if you're want to be an artist. You live a certain life in order to manifest that. Like how you just described, like from the Native American perspective. Very fascinating. Well, I'm also very interested in Native American skills, so it's a nice marriage of interest for me. So
Yeah,
very, very
I
cool.
I I learned about all this when I was working at a Native American art gallery in Santa Fe back in the late 80s. And it was amazing because there's Navajo sand painting uh, that is another one of the traditions where they have to grind down the rocks to get different colors of sand. And then they would do these different ritual paintings, which were temporary, like the
Sand
Tibetan
paintings.
paintings that the monks would come and do and then ritually destroy. These Navajo sand paintings were done, as medicine for healing, for
Oh.
different things. And you would have to grind down the rocks that you'd find in different areas, and there would be different symbolism and so forth. So there, this is a big tradition, but even in Europe, hundreds of years ago, you did not go to the art supply store and buy tubes of paint. You had to grind everything. You'd get the materials, you'd grind them, and you'd mix them with your oils or whatever in your studio, or have an assistant do it before you would start to paint.
Right.
So, you needed some charcoal, you would have to go gather the right outdoor materials that you knew would make a good charcoal and make the charcoal.
Mm. All right. It'd be a fun workshop one day to set that up. Very beautiful.
Yes.
um, so thank you for that, sharing all that. I'd love to hear a little bit about your spirituality now. And you said 1972 is when you kind of
Yes.
got into that.
Yeah, I had been in college and heard about it, and there were some very impactful things that happened that made this seem really important. And when I finally started, it was just a remarkable experience and made such a difference in my life. Enabled me to make big changes that I needed to make. And I became a teacher and taught for many, many years. Um, and then met another teacher after, I guess, like 18 years of teaching meditation. I met another spiritual teacher and ended up finding his practices to be just the best thing I'd ever found, and
Mm.
started teaching for him, which is Shri Ravi Shankar from Art of Living Foundation. And
Oh, right. Yeah.
he has this
Absolutely know him.
amazing breathing technique that clears stress out of your system and is really powerful. So when you sit to meditate, you're already more in that silence. And then he has this beautiful meditation technique as well. And so for many, many years, I've been teaching that and practicing that. And it's just amazing what it does to help your creativity, because you get less worried about what other people think, more stable in yourself, more sensitive to your environment, more inspired by all the amazing things you see in the world, and really more able to translate that into a work of art.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's been a really important thing for me. And I think it's a great tool for all artists.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. Sri Ravi Shankar, of course, that his teacher is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And that's,
Yes, who I originally studied with. Well, I've
okay.
studied personally with both of them.
Oh, very cool. So he's actually my teacher's teacher was a direct disciple of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi,
Ah,
and his name is Swami Sri Atmananda.
ah,
And so it's just fascinating to see that so many things have spurred off of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and very very cool to see. And what was that like spending time with him?
with Maharishi,
Yeah.
it was remarkable. I was in my early 20s and I was on a Vedic studies doctoral program that he had, which was mostly doing very long meditation practices for a big chunk of the day, and then also studying various Puranas and Yoga Sutras and things like that. And it was pretty remarkable because I got to see him a lot. He knew who I was. Uh, I had some really remarkable experiences with him, and it was a big blessing in my life. So it was a very
Wow.
bright, special time. There are not that many authentic, enlightened masters on the planet. There are a lot of people running around saying that, that they're great meditation teachers or whatever. But there are very few who are really here entirely in service, wanting nothing to do but create a better world and help you um, grow to be who you really should be and who you really are inside. So I feel extremely blessed that I really have had both of them and have both of them still.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, I'm sure that that really adds a nice stream to your creations and everything as well.
I
Being
think what
having
it
that
does
connection.
is it makes the works more powerful.
Mm,
So I've had people talk about some of my paintings as being portals where there's just all this energy flowing through.
mm,
And, I don't notice it because I'm just making them and I don't see them quite that way. But I've had people who talk about what they perceive and the energy coming out from the paintings. So that's really interesting. And I think that your own consciousness goes into anything you create. And I want to have a really good effect in the world and be a blessing and help uplift and enlighten people. And I think that art can be a partial tool for enlightenment, that it can transform people's experiences and wake them up and nourish them. And this is what great artists have always wanted to do. Matisse wanted people to be able to come home and sit in their chair and look at the art and be healed and soothed by it. And um, the the wonderful Chinese American artist Hung Lu, who unfortunately recently passed away, also wanted that. She wanted her work to heal people
mm.
and to make a difference. And I think it's a really important thing because anything you put out into the world is going to have an effect. We know this from physics and from just our general experience. I would rather be creating work that is going to be nourishing and healing, uplifting, enlightening, expanding, energizing, soothing, than work that is confrontational and jagged and depressing and has a negative effect. I think that in terms of political art, there's wonderful stuff that can be made that is powerful, that can change people's minds and wake them up, like Picasso's Guernica, which is
Right.
the classic example. And all of that's really important, but it's not the sort of thing that I would want in my home.
Exactly. Yeah.
For when you're thinking about buying art for your home, you want to collect things that are going to be nourishing, energizing, soothing, healing, happiness producing. That they have flavors that are going to be life supporting and life enhancing as opposed to life damaging.
Right. Yeah.
And this is something I probably never would have been able to articulate or even think of if I hadn't started meditating.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it seems like when you meditate, you get a sense of meditate or just a sadhana practice. Any spiritual practice that you're really committed to and dedicated to. You start to get this sense that the divine, the whatever you call it, is good. There's this inherent goodness
Hmm.
that's there, and it's leading towards good as well. It wants to manifest something more of itself, more goodness, and I think when we tune into that, we start to create we create anything, but art. If we're talking about art, it shows up a lot of times as things that someone would consider beautiful. There's this inspiration. There's this beauty, and I think that's because the creator itself is leaning its creation. It's mothering its creation to become more beautiful and manifest the deeper truth of the inherent reality that's beneath things. And I think when we're tuned into that, then the artist can help reveal that for the divine, and be kind of its spokesperson or something like that in a
Hmm.
sense. Uh,
Definitely.
its channel, and I think that is the really key role that creatives and artists have right now. It's they're using that portal that they have to reveal a new culture and a new world, a new experience for humanity, and that's precisely why meditation and all these things play such a key role, for sure.
Yeah.
And I love that you had these experiences with such amazing teachers and masters, Sri Ravi Shankar and uh, the Mahesh Yogi, and our teacher, Swami Sri Atmananda. He said that his experience with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he was the only one he met, and he's met like many masters in his time, living in India, and he was the only one he met that was always in this ecstatic joy state, always like radiating that particular quality of the divine, of joy. And I always found that very special. And then when I see these videos of him, it really kind of reveals that. And
Yeah. Well, it's, Marishi could be um, quiet or pensive or get angry at you briefly. Also,
sure,
it's just that there was this underlying, that whole idea of Satchitananda, that the bliss that is there as a stable basis, so that all the little things come and go.
right, yeah, very powerful. Yeah, it must have been kind of magnificent to see that in process. And yeah, it's I guess it's whatever the direction they get. Sometimes you need to be stern. As a master, and that's exactly the precise thing that may be needed for that person in front of them to get them to their next state of sincerity or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, very very cool.
Yeah.
And so your art, and spirituality, like when you're making art, I feel like for each artist it's a little different how they kind of communicate that spiritualism, or how it comes to them. Is there a certain way the inspiration comes to you? Is it like a feeling, and you just kind of paint that feeling, or is it like these ideas that come into your mind? I'm kind of fascinated by that process.
Uh, It depends upon the particular day or the whatever I'm working on or what ideas just come. Sometimes I'll get an idea that, oh, I want to use these particular materials or images, or I just want to make a painting and I'll pick out colors or I'll just start doing something. And for me, it's always been a matter of having a little bit of information, just enough to get started, and then more and more reveals itself during the process. It's really a matter of having to just keep the faith and keep trusting that the next bit will come through. It's like, Indiana Jones, that time where he needed to get across this big chasm to
Right.
get something important. And there's no way across, but he was told he could do it. So he just decided to have faith and put one foot out over nothing. And miraculously, there was something solid under it. And then he had to trust to put the next foot and keep going. And that's basically what I usually do when I'm making art. It would be nice if I knew the whole thing ahead of time, but it's just not the way that
Right.
it works for me. And
Right.
I've talked to other artists where it's a completely different process. For example, Agnes Martin, who is a very wonderful and famous American artist, used to live in Galisteo, New Mexico, when I was living in Santa Fe. And in the late 80s, I guess it was around 89, I looked her up in the Santa Fe phone book and got her phone number. And I called her and asked if I could come visit, and she said yes.
Oh, cool.
And so I
Wow.
ended up making a series of visits to her that were just incredibly special. And on the first one, she talked about the fact that she wakes up in the morning and has the entire painting in her head, the entire vision of it, the design, the colors, everything. And she says she doesn't get out of bed until it comes. Sometimes she has to stay in bed a little while. And then she goes to the studio and duplicates that image. And she says if she doesn't duplicate it, that it doesn't work. That
Oh, wow.
she has to get it just right.
Right.
And I thought, gosh, so completely different from how I work.
Yeah. That's what
Uh,
I'm talking about. Yeah, it's like there's visionary artists that kind of get these like distinct pictures that
yeah,
come in, and it's like that's it, and they caught something and they replicate it, and it's a spiritual thing. It came from a higher plane probably, and they were able to receive it, and then they make it, and that sounds just like Agnes Martin how she described it.
yes, and I've had images come to me like that, but they're not for paintings. They're kind of like signs.
Hmm.
For example, at one point when I was writing my dissertation on the creative process, and I used a model from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras for how we as individuals create and how the whole universe came into being. And so it was extremely interdisciplinary. And at one point when I was writing this, which took, months and months and months, I had this vision of Spider Woman, scurrying across and starting to weave a web. And it wasn't because I was supposed to make a painting of Spider Woman, even though I was already a painter. It was just that I was tuned in to that level where everything comes up from. And so I would get these signs. And it's the same thing, if I'm writing a poem, lines just start coming,
Hmm.
or ideas that, oh, I could do something with this particular color, or something. And I'll just try to immediately write it down. So I have paper for notes on my desk, in my studio, and by my bed, because I found that I really come up with a lot of stuff I have to write down. And the more I listen to it and get it down on paper so that I don't lose it, the more frequently it comes.
Wow.
But I have not had that Agnes Martin experience where I wake up in the morning and there's this entire painting in chartreuse with blues, and there are these forms over here and this type of
Yeah.
swirl over there. I don't get that. It
Yeah.
would be handy, but I guess that I'm supposed to always just trust that everything will come when it needs to come.
Right, right. Yeah, I can relate actually a little more. I'm more like you, but I have like sometimes I'm kind of like floating between. Like I'll get like a basic image, like or an idea, and there's a feeling of the inspiration kind of bundled with it,
Yeah.
and then so I know like I'm going to start this thing. This idea kind of looks like this. It has this feeling, and it's representing this. But then I go to start painting, and it that's when the faith really kicks in. Well, when it has to kick in, because I may be feeling like now I have to make a different stroke that completely contradicts the prior mental conception that I had just like 5 minutes ago. So it definitely, I think painting like that is just what you said. It exercises that quality of faith and kind of makes that stronger, and it's like part of the spiritual practice almost, just to you're having faith that it's going to work out, and it's also like a surrender, like okay, well, I'm painting over what I kind of liked already, but uh, I'm just gonna go with the flow and trust that it's gonna work out anyways.
Yes. So, these are good life skills and good skills when you're in the studio as well.
Right.
It's all connected.
Yeah. Very cool. And so yeah, I just have a couple more, I guess, questions here that I wanted to just bring up. Um, we kind of already talked about it, but I guess you do feel that art can contribute to healing for, I guess, Earth, the humanity. Do you feel like that art really plays a role in that sense?
Absolutely. The arts are very uplifting. There was an artist in Santa Fe who used to make all these little pieces of jewelry that said art saves lives. And it does. The reason we have all this culture and why most countries really support the arts is that it gives you a sense of identity, it gives you a direction, it saves you when crazy things are going on in the world or in your own life. And so it's extremely important. And be, and so I think it's always wonderful when people are using their creative skills, and when anyone goes ahead and goes to a concert or to a museum, um, or takes a class, because it's important to have fun and have happiness in life. Otherwise, you can get so bogged down that you never make any progress and you contribute to the misery in the world.
Right.
If you want to make a difference in the world and you want to help people who are starving or who are going through unjust situations affecting their health or their safety, you have to have something that is holding you up and nourishing you. And both meditation, spirituality, and the arts play a really important role in these things, because otherwise you become incapacitated and
Mm.
life has no juice to it when you could be juiced up and happy and making a contribution.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, arts they do seem to have that powerful quality of giving you this like nourishing like sense of self or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
which empowers you to act a little bit more confidently. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so meditation, you're very familiar with that. Would you have a certain? Would you recommend that for most people for um, being effective in their lives and using it for inspiration? I assume you would. Would you like to comment on that?
Absolutely. I think it's meditation is a must, especially these days. Life is so uncertain and so stressful. So many disturbing things happen. You never know. And if you're getting constantly tossed around and worn down by all that, then there's just no life. And we need something to not only keep us going, but to revitalize our existence. So I think it's absolutely a must.
Hmm. Right. Beautiful. So, yeah, Sherri, really beautiful talking to you, and I'd love to share with the viewers, where we can discover some of your work and what you've done, perhaps upcoming uh, shows or anything you might have going on.
Okay, so you can always find me on Instagram at Sherri Silverman Studio, Sherri, silver like the metal, MAN, studio, or my website, sherrisilverman.com. I am in a phase of starting all over again with galleries after having gallery representation and being in museum group shows and hanging in the permanent collection in the state capitol building in Santa Fe. Uh, I have nothing on the horizon right now. It's a clean slate,
Nice.
and I'm looking forward to finding new venues to show at and new ways to reach an audience with my work.
Wow, very exciting. I hope, yeah, one day maybe we'll see each other on the same coast, and there'll be some
Yeah.
sort of. I'd love to see some sort of collaboration one day. That'd be a beautiful thing, and see your work. I would love to see it up in. See it here on your website. Very nice gestural work that you have. Very expressive and holds a very lovely energy. But to see it in person would be very nice.
Nice.
I'll keep.
Yeah, it's always much better to see the art in person. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah,
And I do take studio visits by appointment, and that can also be on Zoom. I've done that for some people on the East Coast. So there are different ways. But if you're traveling to Northern California and the San Francisco Bay Area, that's where I am these days.
very cool.
And soon, I'm sure, back in museums and back in galleries.
And then I guess, is there any maybe one last thing you'd like to share for the aspiring artist? I'd say that's looking to benefit the earth or humanity, like through spirituality. Is there anything like a piece of advice, something that you've picked up along the way that has worked for you that might work for another looking to do the same?
Trust yourself and your own inner images and your own way of expressing and find that.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Sherri.
Bye.
Bye.